The 8 o'clock ritual. Chapter 1. In which I develop an entirely reasonable obsession. Let me tell you something about being 73 years old and living alone. You develop routines that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with envy. Mine involved precisely 4 things. My potter's wheel, Radio 4, a cup of Earl Grey at 3 o'clock, and the woman across the courtyard at 8. Not the woman, mind you. Good Lord, I'm not some sort of creep. Just the woman. The painter. The one with the studio apartment directly facing mine, separated by 12 meters of Victorian courtyard and 12 years of mutual, stubborn silence. It started innocently enough. I'd moved into flat 7B in 2013. Dragging my wheel and kiln and 40 years of accumulated pottery equipment up 3 flights of stairs, with the help of 2 very patient removal men, who I suspect drew straws to see who'd have to deal with the ceramic hoarder. That first evening, I'd set up my wheel by the window. Best light in the place, you see. And at precisely 8 o'clock, I switched on my lamp. And so did she. I nearly threw the bowl I was centering. There she was, framed in her window like a painting herself, standing at an easel with a brush in hand, her white hair caught up in what appeared to be a leopard print scarf. Our eyes met for exactly 2 seconds. Then we both did what any sensible British person would do when caught in an awkward moment. We pretended it hadn't happened and carried on with our work. The next night, 8 o'clock, both lights on we went. By week 2, I realized we were both doing it deliberately. By month 2, it had become sacred. By year 2, I'd have sooner skipped Christmas dinner than miss our 8 o'clock ritual. We never waved. Never smiled. Never acknowledged each other beyond those first few seconds of eye contact when the lights came on. But I knew she was there, and she knew I was there, and somehow that was enough. Or at least, I told myself it was enough. The truth? I was absolutely terrified to knock on her door. Just pop over and introduce yourself. My daughter Emma would say during her monthly guilt call from Bristol. How hard can it be? Monumentally hard. I wanted to say. Catastrophically, apocalyptically, end of the world as we know it hard. What if she thought I was a stalker? What if she preferred the mystery? What if she'd built me up in her mind as some sort of noble, silent artistic companion, and I turned out to be just Gerald Humphreys, a retired civil servant who makes wonky teapots and talks to himself when the pottery goes wrong? What if she was perfectly happy with things exactly as they were? So I stayed in flat 7B, and she stayed in flat 7A, and every evening at 8 o'clock, we switched on our lights and worked in our separate, together silence. Until last Tuesday. Chapter 2. The Dark Window. Tuesday started like any other day. I threw 3 bowls before lunch. 1 decent, 2 destined for the recycling bin. Listened to the archers, ate a cheese sandwich while standing at the counter. Emma would have murdered me for that. And spent the afternoon glazing a set of mugs I was planning to give to the church fundraiser. At 7:30, I made my evening cup of tea. Earl Grey, dash of milk, no sugar. The same cup I'd been using for 8 years. One of my own, naturally, in a rather fetching shade of teal that I was quite proud of. At 7:45, I wedged a fresh lump of clay and set it by my wheel. At 7:55, I washed my hands, dried them on the towel that lies by the sink, and took my position at the wheel. At 8 o'clock precisely, I reached for the lamp switch. Her window stayed dark. I stared at it, my hand frozen on the switch. Perhaps she was running late? I waited 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. Nothing. I switched on my own lamp anyway. Seemed rude not to, after 12 years. But my heart wasn't in it. I couldn't focus on the bowl I was meant to be making. I kept glancing up at that dark window, feeling something uncomfortably like panic rising in my chest. She'd never missed a night. Not once in 12 years. Not during the heat wave of 2018 when we'd both worked with our windows flung open, and I could hear Puccini drifting across the courtyard. Not during the pandemic when the whole world stopped but we kept on, two stubborn artists maintaining our ritual like lighthouse keepers tending their lamps. Not during the winter of 2019 when the heating broke and I could see my breath in the studio, but still 8 o'clock, both lights blazing. By 8:15, I'd abandoned all pretense of working. By 8:30, I was pacing. By 9 o'clock, I'd convinced myself she was dead. Dead, and I didn't even know her name. I'd been watching this woman for 12 years, had oriented my entire evening around her presence, had come to think of her as, well, not a friend, exactly, but something. A companion. A fellow traveler. And I didn't know her bloody name. What kind of person does that make me? A British one, I could hear Emma saying. A spectacularly British one. I sat down at my wheel. Stood up again. Made another cup of tea. Considered whether it was too late to call Emma and ask her advice. Decided it definitely was. She'd want to know why I'd never mentioned the window woman before, and that was a conversation I wasn't ready to have. At 9:30, I did something either very brave or very stupid. I put the kettle on. Chapter 3. In which I discover my hands have stopped working properly. Making tea for two shouldn't be complicated. It's barely more complicated than making tea for one. And yet, standing in my kitchen at 9:45 on a Tuesday night, I somehow managed to 1. Drop the tea caddy. Earl Grey everywhere. 2. Burn my hand on the kettle. Not badly, but enough to say several words I don't normally use. 3. Forget where I keep the good cups. In the cupboard where they've lived for 12 years. 4. Nearly use the mug with the chip in it. Unacceptable. 5. Knock over the sugar bowl despite not taking sugar. My hand just found it. By the time I had 2 proper cups of tea ready. In matching cups, thank you very much, I'm not a barbarian. I was sweating like I'd run a marathon. I stood there looking at them. 2 cups of tea. Sitting on my counter. Mocking me. This is ridiculous, I said aloud. You're 73 years old, Gerald. You've been through a divorce, raised a daughter, worked for Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs for 35 years. You can certainly walk 12 meters across a courtyard and knock on a door. The cups said nothing. Right then. I picked them up. Carefully. Walked to my door. Put them down to open it. Picked them up again. Made it to the landing before realizing I hadn't checked my reflection. Bugger. Back inside. Cups down. Quick look in the hall mirror. The hall mirror informed me that I looked exactly like what I was. A panicked 73-year-old man with clay dust in his eyebrows and hair that hadn't seen a proper comb since this morning. My cardigan had a hole in the elbow. There was a mysterious stain on my collar that might have been tea or might have been glaze. My trousers were the ones I wore for pottery. Comfortable but hardly impressive. Too late now. I told my reflection. She might be dying in there. That got me moving. I grabbed the cups. Sloshing a bit of tea in the process, naturally. And made it out the door, down the stairs, across the courtyard. Which seemed to have tripled in size. And up the 3 flights to flat 7A before my courage could desert me. Then I stood there. Her door was dark green. Needed a fresh coat of paint. There was a small bronze number 7A screwed to it, slightly crooked. A doormat that said welcome in faded letters. Very ordinary. Very normal. Except it wasn't normal at all, because behind that door was her. The woman I'd been watching. Not watching, observing, coincidentally noticing. For 12 years. And I was about to knock. After 12 years. Holding tea. This is mental, I whispered. But my hand was already moving. 3 sharp knocks. Loud enough to be heard but not so loud as to be alarming. I hoped. Nothing. I waited. Counted to 30 in my head. Knocked again. Still nothing. Right. Either she was dead, or I was making an absolute fool of myself and she was in there with headphones on, or at her evening yoga class, or visiting a friend, or doing any of the thousands of normal things a person might do on a Tuesday evening that didn't involve switching on a lamp at 8 o'clock sharp. I was turning to leave. Already rehearsing how I'd explain to myself why I'd overreacted. When I heard it. A voice. Muffled. From inside. Hold on. Hold on, I'm coming. My heart launched itself into my throat and set up camp there. The door opened. Chapter 4. In which everything I'd imagined is completely wrong. First surprise. She was in a bathrobe. Not a dressing gown, mind you. A proper fuzzy bathrobe in alarming shade of hot pink, with what appeared to be penguins on it. Cartoon penguins. Wearing tiny scarves. Second surprise. She was holding a wine glass. Third surprise. She was laughing. Oh my God, she said, in an accent I couldn't immediately place. American, possibly? Canadian? You actually came over. Larry owes me 20 quid. I stood there like a complete idiot, holding 2 cups of rapidly cooling tea, trying to process any of this. You're light. I managed. I know. She laughed again, a big, genuine laugh that crinkled her whole face. I told Larry. That's my son, he's visiting from Toronto. I said, Larry, if I don't turn my light on tonight, the sweet old man across the way is going to completely lose it. And he said, Mum, don't be ridiculous, he probably doesn't even notice. And I said, Larry, I have been watching this man work at his pottery wheel every single night for 12 years. He notices. 20 quid says he notices. You're not dead, I said. She blinked. No. I thought you were dead. Oh honey. Her expression softened. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't think. I mean, I hoped you'd notice, but I didn't think about. Oh, come in. Come in, you poor thing. Is that tea? Before I could formulate a response, I was inside her flat. Chapter 5. In which I learned several important things. Important thing number 1. Her name was Margot Bellamy. Not Margaret. Margot. Like the actress. Important thing number 2. She was 71, originally from Vancouver, and had moved to London in 1979 to study at the Slade. Important thing number 3. Her flat was exactly the same layout as mine but felt like an entirely different universe. Where my place was all neutral tones and carefully organized pottery supplies, hers was an explosion of color. Canvases everywhere. Leaning against walls, stacked in corners, hanging in clusters that should have clashed but somehow worked. The walls themselves were painted in sections. Deep blue, burnt orange, a yellow that hurt to look at. Her easel stood by the window, exactly where I'd always seen it. Surrounded by paint tubes and brushes in old jam jars. It was glorious and chaotic and so completely alive that I wanted to either flee immediately or never leave. Important thing number 4. Larry was 42, taught mathematics at a university in Toronto, and was sitting on a truly hideous floral sofa with a laptop balanced on his knees and the smuggest expression I'd ever seen on a human face. Mum, he said, not looking up from his screen. Is this the pottery man? Larry, don't be rude. Gerald, this is my son. Larry, this is Gerald from across the way. The one I've been telling you about. The one you've been obsessing over, you mean? I don't obsess, I observe. You've been scheduling your entire evening around when he turns his light on for 12 years. That's not obsessing, that's maintaining a routine. You cried when he was gone for a week last year. I thought he might be in hospital. I cleared my throat. Sorry, I was visiting my daughter in Bristol. They both turned to look at me. I'd forgotten I was still holding the cups of tea. Oh God, your tea must be cold. Margot took both cups from my hands, set them on a table that was already covered in art magazines and sketchbooks, and steered me to an armchair that was surprisingly comfortable despite being covered in what appeared to be cat hair. Larry, get Gerald a proper drink. Wine? Whiskey? What do you drink? Tea, usually. At 10 o'clock at night? Live a little. Larry, pour him a whiskey. The good stuff, from the top shelf. Mum, I don't think, Larry James Bellamy, I have waited 12 years for this man to knock on my door, and now that he's finally here, we are having a proper drink. Gerald, tell me everything. What do you make? I can see the bowls and things through your window, but I've never seen them up close. Are they stoneware? Porcelain? Do you have a kiln in your flat? How do you manage the ventilation? Chapter 6. In which I become slightly tipsy and very confused. The whiskey was indeed the good stuff. Which is how I found myself, 2 hours later, on my third glass, telling Margot and Larry about the complete disaster that was my first pottery class in 1978. So there I am, I said, gesturing expansively with the glass. When had I become a person who gestures? Absolutely covered in clay, and this woman, this very posh woman from Kensington, looks at what I've made and says, "Oh, how rustic." Rustic. As if I'd done it on purpose. As if I was some sort of primitive folk artist instead of a man who'd just completely ballsed up a simple bowl. Margot was crying with laughter. Actual tears. What did you do? I told her it was an abstract exploration of the vessel form and charged her 40 quid for it. No. Absolute truth. She bought it. Oh, I like you, Margot said, reaching over to pat my knee. I like you very much. Larry had abandoned his laptop an hour ago and was watching us with an expression that I couldn't quite read. Amusement, maybe? Or concern? Did he think I was hitting on his mother? Good Lord, was I hitting on his mother? No. Definitely not. This was just friendly. Two artists. Neighbors. Having drinks. Neighbors who'd been watching each other for 12 years. Can I ask you something? I said, feeling bold in the way that whiskey makes one feel bold. Why didn't you ever come over? To my place, I mean. Margot's smile turned a bit sheepish. Same reason you didn't come over here, I expect. Crippling cowardice? I was going to say British Reserve, but yours is more accurate. She swirled the wine in her glass. I liked our ritual. Every evening, 8 o'clock, there you'd be. Working away at your wheel, completely focused. It was comforting. Knowing you were there. Having a witness to the work, even if we never spoke. I felt the same. I admitted. Emma, my daughter, thought I was balmy. Larry thinks I'm lonely. I don't think you're lonely, Larry interjected. I think you're stubborn. I prefer to think of it as independent. You've lived alone for 20 years, Mum. When's the last time you went on a date? Margot threw a cushion at him. When's the last time you went on a date? I'm focusing on my career. Exactly. We're both focusing on our careers. Mum, you're 71. You're not exactly. Careful. Margot warned. Very careful how you finish that sentence. I found myself laughing. It had been a long time since I'd been part of this kind of banter. Emma and I were close, but she was so busy with her own life, and our phone calls tended toward the practical. When did I last have my boiler serviced? Was I remembering to eat vegetables? Had I thought about that retirement home she'd sent me the brochure for? This was different. This was fun. I should probably go, I said, not wanting to overstay my welcome. It's getting late. It's 10:15, Margot said. That's not late, that's civilized. But yes, if you need to go. I stood up. The room tilted slightly. Right. 3 whiskeys. Thank you, I said. For not being dead. Margot burst out laughing again. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. I'll walk you out, Larry said, unfolding himself from the sofa. At the door, Margot gave me a hug. An actual hug. When was the last time someone other than Emma had hugged me? Same time tomorrow? She said. 8 o'clock? Lights on. Wouldn't miss it. But maybe. She bit her lip, looking suddenly uncertain. Maybe afterward, you could come over. For a proper drink? I'd like that. Really? Really? Her smile could have lit up the whole building. Chapter 7. The New Routine. Wednesday, 8 o'clock. Lights on. We waved. Both of us, deliberately, in full view. It felt absurd and wonderful. 8:30. I was at her door with a bottle of wine and a cheese board I'd assembled with probably too much thought. Did she like Stilton? Was Brie too presumptuous? Were crackers enough, or should I have brought bread? Thursday, 8 o'clock. Lights on. I held up a freshly thrown bowl. She held up a small canvas. We both laughed. 8:30. She came to mine. Brought homemade brownies that were still warm and possibly the best thing I'd ever tasted. We sat at my kitchen table until midnight, talking about everything and nothing. Friday, 8 o'clock. Lights on. Larry was flying back to Toronto the next day. He waved from behind his mother's shoulder. I waved back. 8:30. All 3 of us at a pub down the street. Larry told embarrassing stories about Margot's parenting. Margot told embarrassing stories about Larry's teenage years. I sat there feeling like I'd somehow stumbled into the kind of evening I'd convinced myself I was too old to have. Saturday, 8 o'clock. Lights on. Just the 2 of us again. Larry's flight was at noon. When Margot held up a piece of paper with a question mark on it, I nodded. 8:30. Margot knocked on my door. Larry says I need to be direct with you British types or nothing will ever happen. Direct about what? Are we dating? I stared at her. Do you want to be? Gerald. Margot. I'm 71 years old. I don't have time for games. I'm 73. So, are we dating or are we just 2 old people having drinks? Can't we be both? She smiled. I suppose we can. Chapter 8. In which Emma has opinions. You're what? Emma's voice through the phone was loud enough that I had to hold it away from my ear. Dating. I'm dating someone. Since when do you date? You don't date. You haven't dated since Mum, and that was 30 years ago. Yes, I'm aware. Who is she? How did you meet? Dad, if this is one of those online things, she lives across the courtyard. We've been neighbors for 12 years. Silence. Then. The window woman? You knew about her? Dad. You've mentioned her approximately 8,000 times. The woman across the way was working late. The woman across the way had her window open. The woman across the way was painting with a new color today. Of course I knew. I didn't mention her that often. You've mentioned her in literally every phone call for the past 5 years. Had I? Bloody hell. Well, I said. Now we're dating. And? And what? And what's she like? Is she nice? Is she interesting? Does she make you happy? I thought about Margot. About how she laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them. About how she painted with music blaring and danced between brush strokes. About how she'd shown up at my door last night with Thai takeaway and insisted we eat it straight from the containers, because plates are for people who care about being fancy. Yes, I said. She makes me very happy. Emma's voice went soft. Good. Dad, that's really good. Chapter 9. Forward momentum. 3 weeks in, and I learned that Margot put hot sauce on everything, and I mean everything, including toast. Had lived in 7 different countries. Spoke 3 languages fluently and 2 others well enough to get by or insult someone. Had been married twice, divorced twice, and had decided she was done with all that nonsense. Had a laugh that started as a chuckle and built into something that shook her whole body. Snorted when she laughed too hard. Hated being called Margaret. Loved terrible reality TV shows. Could quote entire Monty Python sketches from memory. Had a scar on her left arm from an incident with a canvas stretcher that we don't talk about. Cried during dog food commercials. Had never, in her entire life, finished a tube of lipstick before losing it. 4 weeks in, I learned that I could tell her about how I'd wanted to be an artist full-time but had been too scared to try. The year after my divorce when I'd barely made anything. How I still felt guilty about not being around enough when Emma was young. The recurring dream I had about all my pottery breaking. My fear that I'd wasted too much time being careful. 5 weeks in, I learned that she'd had the exact same fears. 6 weeks in, she suggested we take a pottery class together. But I already know pottery. I protested. Yes, but I don't. And I want you to teach me. Officially. I'm not qualified to teach. Gerald. You've been throwing pots for 40 years. 45, actually. Fine. 45 years. Teach me. So I did. Chapter 10. The lesson. This is much harder than it looks, Margot said, covered head to toe in clay slip, her hair escaping from a paint-splattered bandana. It takes practice. How long did it take you to make your first decent bowl? 2 years. 2 years? Pottery is patient work. I'm not patient. I've noticed. She stuck her tongue out at me. At 71. Stuck out her tongue. It was possibly the most charming thing I'd ever seen. Okay, she said, positioning her hands on the clay. Show me again. I moved behind her, placing my hands over hers. Feel the clay. Don't fight it. You're guiding it, not forcing it. That's very zen. It's very necessary. Otherwise you end up with a wonky mess. I like wonky messes. I've seen your paintings. I'm aware. Hey. But she was laughing, and the bowl was actually starting to take shape, and I realized with a start that I'd never been this happy teaching anyone anything before. There, I said. See? You're getting it. Am I? Well. It has character. That's what you say about something truly terrible, isn't it? No. It's genuinely. The bowl collapsed. Just folded in on itself like a badly pitched tent. We both stared at it. Pottery is stupid, Margot announced. Pottery is an ancient and noble art form. Stupid ancient noble art form. Next week we'll try again. Next week I'm teaching you painting. Oh no. Oh yes. Fair's fair. Chapter 11. The painting. Painting, I discovered, was absolutely terrifying. Just put the brush on the canvas, Margot said, standing behind me with her arms crossed. It's not that simple. It literally is. Canvas. Brush. Paint. Apply brush with paint to canvas. Move brush around. Art happens. That's not how art works. Gerald. You're 73 years old. This canvas cannot hurt you. It's judging me. The canvas is judging you. Yes. She moved next to me, picked up a brush, and made a bold red stroke across my pristine white canvas. I gasped. Literally gasped. There, she said. Now it's started. Your turn. You can't just. That was. I was working up to, for 20 minutes. Gerald. Stop thinking. Just paint. So I did. I made a blue stroke. Then a green one. Then yellow. Then I stepped back and looked at what I'd done. It's terrible, I said. It's wonderful. It looks like a toddler did it. Exactly. Free. Unself-conscious. Joyful. Those are kind words for bad. She took my face in her paint-covered hands. Gerald Humphreys. You've spent 45 years making perfect bowls. Maybe it's time to make something imperfect on purpose. I looked at the canvas. At the mess of colors. At Margot, with her blue-stained fingers and her ridiculous smile. Can I kiss you? I asked. She blinked. Finally. Finally. I've been waiting for 6 weeks. Why didn't you just kiss me? Because I wanted you to ask. Now stop stalling and. I kissed her. Reader, it was imperfect and wonderful. Chapter 12. The exhibition. 3 months after Margot's light didn't turn on, she had news. I've been invited to show at a gallery, she said, bursting into my flat one Thursday evening, waving a letter. A proper gallery. In Shoreditch. They want 12 pieces. That's wonderful. It's terrifying. I haven't done a proper show in 5 years. What if I've forgotten how? What if nobody comes? What if they come and hate everything? Then they have terrible taste. Gerald. Margot. Your work is brilliant. Anyone with eyes can see that. She sat down heavily on my sofa. Will you come? To the opening? Of course. Even though there'll be people? Lots of people. Being. Peoply. Even then. The opening was in December. Margot was a nervous wreck for weeks beforehand, second-guessing every piece, changing the order, changing it back. I'd never seen her so unsure of herself. The night of the opening, I wore my best jumper. The one without holes. And my good shoes. Which I'd had to dig out from the back of the closet. Margot wore a dress the color of sunset and looked absolutely terrified. What if it's awful? She said in the taxi. It won't be. What if nobody understands the work? Then you'll explain it. What if, Margot? I took her hand. It's going to be fine. It was better than fine. The gallery was packed. Larry had flown in from Toronto and was holding court in one corner, telling everyone who'd listen about his brilliant mother. Emma stood next to a large abstract piece, nodding seriously at a man in a very interesting hat. But the best part was watching Margot. She glowed. Absolutely glowed, talking about her work, laughing with visitors, explaining her process. This was her element, and I realized I'd never seen this side of her before. The professional artist, confident and articulate and completely in command. "Your girlfriend is very talented," a woman said to me. "She is," I agreed. "How long have you been together?" 3 months. "But I've known her for 12 years. The woman looked confused, but I just smiled. Epilogue. 12 years and 3 months. We never moved in together. Margot liked her space, and I liked mine, and after 12 years of watching each other from across the way, we'd both grown rather attached to our own domains. But every evening at 8 o'clock, the lights came on. And every evening at 8:30, one of us would knock on the other's door. I'd wasted 12 years being afraid. 12 years of standing at my wheel, throwing pot after pot, while happiness lived just 12 meters away. But here's what I'd learned. It's never too late. Not for new routines, or new relationships, or new chapters. Or for finally having the courage to knock on a door. Though I'd recommend doing it before 12 years have passed. And definitely bring tea.